Good evening. At the tone, the time will be 11:04 and 30 seconds.
Radio BI for mobile test. I received this, over.
At the tone, the time will be 11:04 and 30 seconds.
9:30. Yeah, we're following a blue custom van. We are at Shaner, westbound on Tacoma. He's going to be southbound on Shaner. It's a GMC. Vehicle may be involved in a abduction. Took off on a high rate of speed from us. We're still southbound on Shaner, passing Liberal.
Southbound on Shaner, passing Liberal.
99 to 7 in Shaner.
99 to 7 in Shaner. Possibly involved in an abduction. That's a blue van.
That's actually going to be like a blue and a white.
Like a blue and white van. Blue and white van.
99 to 7 in Shaner.
99 to 7 in Shaner. Possibly involved in an abduction.
I couldn't move my left side of my body.
And I can hear the glass shattering from the windshield.
I'm blind in my right eye. I have a prosthetic eye.
And sometimes it's easier just to stay in a state of denial.
It indicates there was a gunshot wound to the entrance of the right side of the neck.
Take my baby, take my baby. She just thought about her baby. He murdered my pregnant wife. I thought about killing myself.
Back into a situation to put us in there.
Now, I was shot in the back. I will never, ever forget that. I need help, man. In other words, I'm an alcoholic.
You make me want to beat your tail.
That man saved my life. Long time no see.
He's probably the most difficult person I've met.
Still southbound. He's crossing 6 miles, still southbound.
There he is. We're doing about 30 miles an hour. There is no plate on this van. No plate. We got shots.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Two officers shot. That guess you 9:30? 9:30, is that you? With two officers shot? 9:30. Okay, we got two officers shot.
Leo, my partner is hit bad. My partner is hit bad. I am shot in the neck and the shoulder.
Okay, where are you? 6 Mile and what?
6 Mile and Minute Radio. We need EMS. We need EMS.
I hate it when I hear the word hero thrown around today. You know, you just put on a uniform and suddenly anybody can be a hero. You know, people wouldn't be so quick to use that word if they ever met a real hero. They're not like you and I. They're totally different. You know, there's something that lives deep inside of them that you just can't explain. And not all of us have it. But when you see it for yourself, when you recognize it, you will understand. It's more than just courage. It's more than just being brave. Way more. You know, we expect our heroes to be famous, you know, to see them in movies and on television and read about them in books. But the truth is, some heroes are simply forgotten, and that's sad.
Okay. Grab my bottle, kid.
At 6'5", 350 pounds, Mike Todd's greatness is obscured by his obvious disability. He's still a hero to me, but in a slightly different way. He no longer rides around in a scout car with a partner through the streets of Detroit. Rather, today he requires a full-time aide. He no longer answers radio calls. It is he who now must ask for help. friendship and camaraderie are limited, his elevation to becoming Detroit's 1999 Police Officer of the Year, earning him respect of local politicians and celebrities, and law enforcement throughout the entire state has dissipated into thin air like a puff of smoke from a discarded cigarette. Nobody calls anymore. The former bodybuilder and high school football star now lives alone in a small bungalow situated on Detroit's northeast side. He struggles with seizures and depression, paranoia, OCD, paralysis, and blindness. A constant reminder of that ugly day a bullet from a drug dealer who had just kidnapped a mother and child pierced his brain. I first met Mike back in 2007. It was on a day that we delivered a brand new power chair to his home, a gift from the nonprofit charity that I had formed that same year that I called the Living Legends Organization. It was our job to help sick, injured, and disabled police officers and their families. And Mike happened to be our very first client. He needed the chair, he said, to give him greater mobility, but for a very special reason. And that reason is to spend more time with his son.
I can't spend the time that I want to spend with them as a father and a child do. And my injury robbed me of a lot of time to spend with him.
Mike rarely had opportunities to visit with his son because he lived with his mother, who at one time was Mike's longtime girlfriend. The boy was just a baby when his father was shot. 7 years later, the bottom fell out of Mike's life. The city of Detroit filed bankruptcy. His disability pension was cut, his health care benefits nearly eliminated, and he was getting sicker. There weren't very many people willing to step up to help him, but I was one of a handful who did.
Got it?
Bankruptcy left Mike bitter and unapologetic.
But you got jokers down there. No, I wouldn't left a fucking finger to help them folks. Now when you gonna stab me in the back?
Before we did anything, Mike had me drive him through his old beat, the notorious 9th Precinct, which at one time was considered one of the most dangerous and crime-ridden areas in the entire United States. And to think, Mike Todd volunteered to work it.
He was very aggressive, in a good way, in a positive way. He liked to go out and work. He liked to do a lot of investigations.
What I didn't know, though, was that today, for the very first time since the shooting, he has decided to return. His tone suddenly changed. His voice grew quiet, as if we were venturing down a street populated by sleeping ghosts of the past, and he was afraid of waking them.
I wouldn't come down. This used to be a hot spot for drugs and guns too, right here. Man, they gonna know we the police.
Not this old car.
They gonna think we undercovers. Look at this. And at night ain't nothing down here. This is where they start unloading us. That's when you start to let it go. Man, I ain't been down. I can't believe you got me down here. You got a full gun, don't you? You laughing? I'm not laughing. No, don't take me down here, man. All the guys, these guys that I put in, they just starting to get out. Down here, we used to get a lot of guns down here. You could be down here at night, all of a sudden you hear bam, bam, bam. Oh, you gonna hit the sheet ice. You can hear Bam, 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 bam.
My 6-month apprenticeship with Mike Todd would be humbling. I would learn firsthand, as his personal aide, the difficulties and the frustrations he encountered daily. My indoctrination began by learning the complicated mechanics of loading and unloading his power chair. Then he gave me a few pointers on how to guide him across the parking lot.
There's things on my right side that I'm gonna miss, and that's where I need the assistance of my caregiver to be my eyes and ears to things, to traffic and people walking on the right side, because that's the side that I'm blind in, and I miss certain things.
Mike was a massive guy, unsteady on his feet for sure, so it wasn't an easy task getting him into his chair. His feet had to be properly positioned, his seatbelt snugly cinched, and he told me if I did it wrong.
You gotta tighten up a little more.
The bullet that ripped out his right eye and penetrated his brain shut down the entire left side of Mike's body. To you and I, it was equal to hauling around an extra 150 pounds of dead weight. It compromised his balance and his ability to judge distances, not to mention cutting off half of his field of vision. He once told me that to others, he looked like Quasimodo, and to himself, he felt like it too. But he had so much to deal with inside, battles he could never win.
I turned my back in an attempt to get my gun, which again, I'm right-handed, but I carry on my left side. And at that point, he stuck the gun back to my head again, and I covered my head, something like that, and he fired a second shot that struck me in the back.
Did he continue to fire at that point?
Yes. Yes, he did.
Charles Johnson was the poster child of a great cop. At 21, he killed a man for threatening to slice the throat of a baby. At 22, he was one of the most decorated young police officers on the Pontiac, Michigan Police Department. I know that for a fact because I was there and we worked together. At 24, he would fall victim to a horrific gun battle with an armed killer that would leave 3 people seriously wounded, and it would take the life of his 21-year-old pregnant wife. At 25, his career was essentially over. Disabled physically, crushed emotionally, Charlie Johnson, without any fanfare or even a simple thank you, would fade from sight. Charlie's absence from the public was like a vacuum in time. His indelible reputation morphed into an urban legend that lasted for decades. All of us remembered him with reverence and held him in high regard.
He really was a person that people looked to as a very positive person that could make a real difference.
It wasn't until 40 years later, when a tip that Charlie was still around led me to a low-income apartment complex located on Pontiac's northeast side. What I discovered inside broke my heart. Unbelievable. Charlie Johnson had become a recluse, hiding behind the walls of an isolated vacant apartment, far from the prying eyes of anyone who once knew him. His bedroom reeked like alcohol and urine, and the queen-size mattress on the floor next to his TV represented his life's possessions. It was a sad sight to see. I barely recognized him, and I had to introduce myself twice for him to greet me back. Obviously, the years of constant pain and torture has presented me with the shriveled carcass of a man I once admired. I really didn't quite know what to think at the time, but I did know one thing. Somebody had to help this man. And surprisingly, he agreed.
I need help. So I'm going to keep attending. AA meetings or whatever.
Yeah, and then we'll
I need help, man, you know.
Alcohol addiction, the numerous DWIs, hospitalizations, hundreds of public intoxications, rehab centers, thoughts of suicide flooded the previous 40 years of Charlie Johnson's life, trying to forget the ugly memories, trying to forget the moments in time that punctuated his professional life.
And at that time in the 70s, there was a poor understanding of PTSD. There was, you know, the way that the old guard dealt with that was substance abuse. And there was no real mechanism in place to help him.
Johnson bore his first cross in December of 1976 when the 21-year-old rookie was forced to shoot and kill a man holding his own infant daughter hostage with a butcher knife on the steps of the police station following a heated argument with his wife.
He had a knife up the throat the whole time, from before I even saw the guy.
He demanded a ride to the airport to return to his homeland of Puerto Rico. Johnson and his partner were ordered to take him. He took his position in the front seat of the police car. Johnson sat directly behind him in the back seat. His partner drove. I followed closely behind as their backup. At the edge of town, Johnson and his partner suddenly swung into the driveway of a local hospital in a desperate attempt to negotiate. The father became irate, piercing the baby in the neck with the tip of the knife. And that's when Johnson shot him in the back of the head.
When I fired, the guy turned around and he looked me dead in my eyes. He said, man, he was saying, man, I was just joking. I wasn't going to do this. That's what he said. He just fell over.
Charlie fully realized that he had just ended the life of a father of 3 small girls. So, unexpectedly, he reached out to them.
My own private money. And I took the money, put it on their porch. I ain't talking to nobody. On Valleyville porch with his wife and his kid. Anyway, I got back to supervision. And they told me, don't do that no more.
The killing became a seminal moment for both of us. It would be the first time either of us would see a human being die as the result of gun violence. For Johnson, it would prove to be worse. It was as if the blast from the gun had planted a bullet of contrition into the innermost reserves of his conscience, where it would stalk him for the rest of his life.
Why did you drink today? Why do you think you drank today?
Because I can't forget the past.
Okay.
The past, I used to drink to forget. But as I got older and kept drinking, I got dependent.
Did you think about the past today?
Yeah.
Is that why you drank?
I don't know. Yeah.
Trying to silence his demons with alcohol was torturing Charlie and everybody around him. He realized that facing the truth would put him on a direct collision course with the past and a reality that might be too painful and too white-hot for him to accept.
And when we crossed this street here in Nashville, we went I don't know, maybe to about here, right here, and that's when the shots started to ring out. The car that I was in, driven by Lloyd Todd, he hit the brakes as a natural reaction to the gunfire, and our car came to rest right by that tree over there, on the other side of the street.
Okay, but we're getting ready to leave now. I want to call you, make sure you make it home.
Mike Todd's injury, sadly, left him with a few personality oddities. One was extreme paranoia. He lived behind locked doors and pulled window shades. He trusts no one.
There's times that I would say a state of depression overcomes Mike, and he gets quite down at times, and we kind of boost each other up, lift each other up.
Okay, that's tight.
You all right?
You're looking good.
Good. Let's go.
Okay.
Mike became a creature of precise routine and very high expectations. I discovered this on one of our very first outings to the store. He had a passion for cookies, which required him to carefully inspect the quality and thickness of each one in the container before he decided to buy it. Sometimes it would take him 5 minutes to do it. His bologna had to be sliced to his exact requirements, or he sent it back. He traveled the aisles exactly in the same order as he did the day before, each time telling me what to grab and where to put it in the cart. His diet was totally unhealthy, composed primarily of fatty foods loaded with sugar and sodium that pushed his blood pressure to dangerously high levels. No more burgers?
I told you that.
Huh? Come on.
I told you that, man.
No more burgers, man.
You know what I get.
I was very honored to be his personal aide, don't get me wrong. But an occasional please or thank you would have been nice. Words I rarely heard him say. Perhaps for good reason, though. I admired his courage, his silent struggle to consciously escape the shackles of shame that are attached to being totally dependent on another human being. Every face in the crowd now reminded him he was less than whole, infant-like perhaps. Sometimes the stares hurt more than the bullet that stole his independence. Every once in a while, his routine would be interrupted by a friend or a coworker who instantly recognized him, and then for that very brief moment, he would feel like the great Mike Todd, who once dressed in blue, and everything seemed to go back like it once was.
But listen, I didn't get my CCW, and I'm getting old. I'm 63. I'm 63 and trying to pull up them stairs. It's getting kind of hard. I got a Colonial. It's got.
You still staying on?
But at the checkout, reality hits home again. Mike is embarrassed to learn that his account is overdrawn and he is unable to pay for his groceries. He is forced to call his sister, who is his legal guardian, to transfer some money.
I said it's not going to be that long. Okay, bye.
Another humiliation for him attached to his disability.
I know.
Outside, Mike has difficulty getting out of his chair. A potentially dangerous foot infection, he confesses, is getting worse, and he is concerned. What happened?
It's swollen up because
From what?
Because I have heart problems.
Okay, so it's circulation?
Circulation problems.
Okay.
And I can't improve my heart because I can't move around because I have mobility problems because of my gunshot injury.
Yeah.
It's very common to have skin breakdown. The common places are your buttocks, your sacrum, which is the lower part of your back, even calves and certainly toes. Most of the people in America who suffer a spinal cord injury die from the same thing. They die from sepsis. That's a blood infection, which is a result of this evolution of these decubitus ulcers that cause the skin to break down for a host of reasons.
Take a look at your...
Mike's foot infection was serious, and the threat of an infection in his right prosthetic eye was equally threatening.
The doctor has to remove my prosthetic eye and clean it, because if too many germs accumulate on it, it can cause an infection in my eye socket. And it has to be cleaned, and I use the eye drops daily to try to keep it sterilized, but it still has to come out at least once a month.
His health was deteriorating rapidly since the shooting nearly 20 years ago. His dependency on others was also growing. His relationship with his family was strained, and he was now having trouble finding good in-home healthcare workers to help him get around. His finances were weak, and he was now receiving pressure from many around him to simply sell his house and move into a nursing home. It terrified him. He felt alone, and he felt abandoned.
And Lloyd was sitting like this with his head down, and this part of his skull was missing, and I thought he was gone.
Well, is it?
I can't control it.
Yeah. You sure?
In other words, I'm an alcoholic. Every time I think about, it may not be no excuse. I just be sitting there by myself. Then I start thinking about the past. Just tell the truth. That's where I was. Just tell the damn truth. You and me.
Well, we'll have to work on it then.
Yes.
At least you admit it. At least you admit
First
it.
step. Yeah, I admitted it a few times.
Charlie Johnson was in big, big trouble. It seemed that he was drinking himself to death intentionally. So I had to come up with a plan. I decided to employ the buddy system, and together I enrolled us in a substance abuse program designed exclusively for cops. Now, at first, it seemed to work. It seemed to help him.
But he made me think, why in the hell? I'm trying hard to quit. So why in the hell did I grab that beer?
But on a night that we were supposed to return, it all came to an end.
I think he's in his apartment, but I don't think he's answering right now.
Charlie wanted to quit, flat out quit. The memories were too painful to share and to face again. And it was now causing him to act out.
Friday night, we had an episode to where he was drunk and he came to me threatening to kill everyone, including his son. And I looked at him and I said, what about me? He said, no, I love you.
I needed a miracle worker to help me. So I searched everywhere and I made a dozen calls. Finally, I located a volunteer who worked at a place called the Grace Centers of Hope in the city of Pontiac, Michigan. He suggested that I get in touch with a dude by the name of Butch. Nobody knew his real name. Evidently, he was a counselor for their residency rehabilitation program. And if anybody could help Charlie Johnson, it was Butch. But I was warned that looks could be deceiving. And boy, was he right. Butch was a former thug inveterate street junkie, enforcer, and former MMA fighter. And everything mean. One tough guy who parlayed his criminal past into saving lives and motivating those who are searching for salvation.
I mean, I lived in hell. You know, I didn't know nothing. I didn't have clothes. I didn't have nothing. Nowhere to stay. I'd stay in abandoned buildings, you know. You know what I mean?
Well, now look at you.
Right. I got bank accounts, credit cards.
You got a basket of food over there.
I know.
Beautiful wife.
I can afford anything I want
Footballer
today.
of the sun. You got a lot.
In a nutshell, it was the criminal and the cop locked together in a common cause to beat down addiction. Charlie Johnson was harboring a much deeper and emotional burden than he was willing to admit. Soaking his brain in alcohol over the past 40 years has failed to stave off his demons.
Tuesday, June 21st, 1978. I will never, ever forget that. No psychiatrist, no doctor, nobody can make me forget that.
Working one-on-one with Butch was his last chance at survival. So he surrendered to the cause and agreed to try one more time.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Long time no see.
You ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right, let's go.
Come
It may sound funny, but I considered Butch to be a product of divine intervention, a voice of truth delivered to us through his pain and sacrifices, all to help Charlie navigate through some troubled times. But then, oddly enough, a similar thing happened a few days later when Charlie and I decided to stop in at the hospital and visit a police buddy of ours who was battling terminal cancer. Charlie hadn't seen him in almost 35 years. Now, Jesse knew Charlie's history. Jesse knew that Charlie was an emotional wreck and was hurting. He had heard the stories. But he also knew exactly what to say to Charlie at that very moment, in spite of his own situation.
Just think, I just want to live. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
I know, and people
The
want
will
you to
to
live.
live.
Yeah.
Yep.
You
The will to live.
you get sometimes you get that weight on you. Everybody got this going. I got. Can you let me have this? I'm taking this. It's getting too crowded in here, and all that kind of stuff. And you get to the place where I just can't take that now.
Yeah.
But then, if you just let it go and go on about your business, you'll be 100% better. 100% better. Take care of yourself. Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's it.
It was an amazing moment, as simple as it was. And sadly, Jesse died 3 days later. But his words lived on, Charlie said, because it provided the exact inspiration that he needed at that time.
When you're doing that, start thinking about them good times we were talking about. You know what I mean? Make yourself smile. Does you good.
Yeah.
You hear me? Mm-hmm. Make your heart happy. You know what I'm saying? Serious.
I'm serious.
Start thinking about
I'm
all
serious
that stuff.
too.
Start thinking about those and like just make yourself smile, and it'll take some of that other stuff off your mind.
And he needed Butch, the one person he could confide in and talk about so many things, but most of all, that one night, that one ugly night when a hail of bullets literally assassinated his entire world. He returns every year, hoping that at one point that he would suddenly wake up and discover that everything was just simply a bad dream. Nothing has changed in 20 years. Westphalia Street still looks the same as it did back on December 5th, 1998. Located in the heart of the 9th Precinct, it still is the most dangerous part of the city of Detroit. It is Mike's ground zero. It is the murder scene of Officer Sean Bandy. It is where a van loaded down with 5 heavily armed drug dealers who were holding a mother and child for ransom over a drug deal gone bad. And it is where Mike Todd and his undercover team were viciously ambushed as they moved in for the rescue.
The driver of the perpetrator vehicle is supposed to be wearing all white.
A van passed us that matched the description of which the perpetrators were in. And after a few blocks of following them, they knew we were back there, and they gradually increased their speed to a point where it turned into a pursuit.
The van made the right-hand turn at 7 Mile to go westbound. 30 series cars dead on their heels, still following, only going like 25, 30 miles an hour. At this point, no lights, no sirens. I don't think the people in the van realized that the 30 series car was the police. We fell in behind them. The light turned green for us just as they made their turn. We fell right in behind them. No traffic, no problems, nothing. It was perfect.
That is when the perpetrators in the van we were pursuing started shooting at us.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
All I heard was the shots, and I could feel the rounds hitting the car. It was rocking the car, and my thinking was, what the hell's going on? Somebody's shooting at us, and we're in the middle of a car chase.
And it all happened so fast, and what I can recall is that I can recall just waking up in the hospital. I don't know how many days later because I was in a coma for so long.
2 officer shots. They're on the way. They're on the way to help you out now.
Niggas go on now. 3, I'm here.
Okay.
31, what do I confuse this officer? What do you confuse this officer? Hey.
First unit to get there, let me know.
That vehicle last 9:37. I do not know where these shots came from. I do not know where these shots came from.
Okay, we do not know where the shots came from. We got 2 officers down, 6 Mile and Minden.
Mike Todd would never wear a Detroit police uniform again. Instead, he would now live a life of total dependency. His 24-hour caregivers would be his life's blood. They would invade his home and his most private moments, steal his dignity and his self-respect at the very least. As the years progressed, though, Mike's angry frustrations forced nearly all of them to abandon him, as have some of his family members and, sadly, even his 20-year-old son, who he has not seen in almost 2 years. Many he had forcibly removed from the house. The others, he called the police and had them removed as well. Unable to stop the revolving door of untrained, underpaid, and intolerant babysitters, he called them, he starkly learns the cost of manageable home health care is unfairly beyond his reach, and he had no other options available.
And at the end of the day, quality costs money. It's going to cost about $20,000 a month, so I'd say $250,000 a year to do in-home, 24-hour a day, in-home health aid. So a home health aid, typically 3 8-hour shifts, serving Mike's needs would cost around It's roughly $750 a day, 30 days in a month, $21,500. You got some additional nursing visits costs. Call it $22,000 times 12. So just north of $250,000 is what it's going to cost to have somebody take care of Mike 24/7. The Affordable Care Act actually mimics or models Medicaid. It only gives you, in order to qualify to be a policy under that plan, you model Medicaid. That's 30 visits a year. In addition to that, the only other payer source that exists is Medicare. And Medicare for therapies is a paltry $1,900 a year, period.
Mike sensed a growing conspiracy designed to commit him to a nursing home.
Why doesn't
And I, too, began receiving phone calls from disgruntled caregivers who Mike had recently fired.
He's a really bad person.
He's a bad person?
Yes, he's awful.
How is he awful? Yes, how is he awful? What does he do to be awful?
You know, last time, working like 3 persons for 1 week, 5. While you know with 1 person, he doesn't like it. Okay? 5. Another person was bad weather, and he say, you know, maybe today we didn't go to, you know, for the store because it's really bad weather, it's really cold.
In a nutshell, the claim was that Mike was too rude and demanding on all of his caregivers. Now, only a handful of friends were willing to step in and lend a hand. His world undoubtedly was beginning to close in on him. And his future, well, it was beginning to look pretty dim.
How did the events of the day begin? You went to the station to pick up Darla, your wife.
Right. She was getting off. In fact, she was getting off early that night because we was going out. And I picked up a few minutes earlier. She was usually get off at 11, and I picked her up right around 10:15, and we was on our way home.
You were driving the car. Darla was the immediate passenger on your right.
Yes, holding our daughter.
In the back seat was Officer Robert Rice.
Right. I was driving out paddock, and
I heard somebody say, Charlie, Charlie. And don't too many people I know call me Charlie, because my name is Charles.
When I stopped the car, I looked around to see who was calling me. They called me by my first name, so I just assumed it was somebody I knew. And I stopped the car, and when I stopped the car, he walked up to the car, and I approached my side, and I put a .357 Magnum up to my head and said, I know you got a gun, go for your gun.
When he said, Charlie, stop, 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 I was thinking maybe somebody was in trouble or something. That's why I stopped the car. But there's no way I would have gotten in a shootout with somebody and had my family in the car. No way.
He had a .357 Magnum revolver, and I grabbed the cylinder, and he tried to pull the trigger at that point, and the cylinder wouldn't rotate, and the pistol wouldn't fire at that point.
Now, Lourdes Mosley, his partner, was right directly behind the car.
What I tried to do is I tried to snatch the gun out of his hand, and when I attempted to snatch the gun out of his hand, his body hit the side of the car, and his weight took the gun out of my hand, and the gun fired, and that's the shot that first hit.
And the bullet that hit my daughter, I put my left hand over her face. That bullet that Sam Hudson shot me with went through my hand, came out of here, and that's the one that hit her in the face.
Hudson stuck the gun back in the car, again up to my head a second time, and I turned my back in an attempt to get my gun which again, I'm right-handed, but I carry on my left side. And at that point, he stuck the gun back to my head again, and I covered my head, something like that, and he fired a second shot.
He kept going around the car.
Eventually got my gun out. I was carrying a 14-shot 9mm, and I fired one shot at him, and I fired a second shot at the guy, Lourdes Mosley, that was with him.
It indicates there was a gunshot wound to the entrance of the right side of the neck, 8 inches from the top of the head and 2 inches to the right of the midline.
A random bullet to the neck killed Charlie Johnson's 22-year-old wife, Darla, and their unborn child of 4 months. Their daughter, Anita, and his partner, Robert Rice, who was wounded on his right side, would recover. The killer, Sam Hudson, who Charlie said he knew personally, would be convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
Charlie had a good sense of humor, but Darla was really the comic relief in the relationship. She was a straight talker and very funny. But at the same time, she had such a warm heart. She would look for opportunities to make everybody's life easier. But her sense of humor and her wit and sharp tongue was really something we enjoyed.
Till the day I die. I think it's that's again. I think if he went to hell, he got killed today, I still was hating him. You know, I'd probably go dig that up out the grave and shoot that. Shoot them bombing fluid out of that. Excuse me for cussing, but that's just how I feel. Mm-hmm. It ain't. Bush is okay, you know, but I don't think nothing and nobody can stop me from hating that. That's just it.
Yeah. I can tell you to stop hating somebody. That's not going to make you stop hating them. You basically got to come to grips with that issue in your mind and in yourself, and face it, and let it go, and not let it destroy the rest of your life.
I asked Charlie to show me Darla's grave, which was a big mistake. Initially, he had difficulty locating it. It had been that long since his last visit.
But the tombstone is shaped like a heart. Right here.
And when he did, everything about that moment revealed to me the brutal pain of a heartbroken man who was still being torn apart by the truth of what really happened that night back in 1978, and why the blame of Darla's murder rested so heavily on his conscience after 40 long, bitter years.
He said that it's been 4 years since he's been there, and he wasn't ready to go back, and it really shook him up, and it brought back, I think, a lot of memories for him that he was trying to bury away, and it upset the man that he just wasn't. He told me, he goes, I'm not ready to go back to the cemetery yet.
And we was, after my daughter was born, the one that got shot, we had planned on having one more girl. Could have turned out to be a boy, but we had planned on having one more girl.
What I didn't know at the time, but I would soon learn later, was that Charlie was harboring a deep, dark secret. Although Anita was only a year or so old when she lost her mother, she always blamed her father for her untimely death.
There's a lot of times I get mad But why would you back up with your family, back into a situation to put us in that? Why not keep going? You had nothing to prove like that. So, and then Charles's gun was the one fired first, because the other guy that was with Sam got shot and took off running. So it's all his fault.
To help support her case as the years went on, she carefully assembled an unlikely cast of allies to convince her father to come forward and tell the truth. They included none other than her older brother James White, Maurice Hudson, the killer's son, and, of all people, Sam Hudson, the killer himself.
Me and my brother he's decided to start looking into it more. And so I started asking questions and writing Sam, and I can't remember the other guy's name that was there tonight, wrote him, talked to some of the people that were on the witness list from the police reports, and got a more clear understanding of what more than likely happened.
I think that he wanted Sam to run, so the next day he would have bragging rights about having Sam on the run maybe. But Sam didn't run. Sam ran to the car, and the struggle started, and not over Sam's gun.
Two unanswered questions always haunted skeptics about the shooting. One, what really provoked Hudson to shoot Johnson in the first place? And two, whose gun was it that they were fighting over?
You know, I told you the only reason why I'm here because of that. I was not the aggressor. I'm minding my business. I'm getting ready to go. Almost hit me with a car. So when we step off the curb, all right, it's a car coming from, up the street. And then I'm thinking it's somebody that's drunk, So I jump back up over the curb. The car going by, the window down. And so, I just holler, wake up, just a residential district, because I'm thinking this is a drunk. So he go all the way to the corner of Paddock and East Wilson, at the stop sign, and he lean out and say something, So I tell him, come on back here and say that, because I couldn't understand what he said. So he put the car in reverse. It's a Gremlin, he bagged all the way back up. That's when I see him lean towards the passenger side. He going for a gun. He going for a gun. I stick my left hand in there, and so when I stick my hand in there, I pin it right there. So now I pull mine. This is the first shot of the whole situation. Instead of just shooting straight out the window, he hook it over his head, and he shoot out the back window. Now I'm gonna just let you know. Now that first shot, that's the shot that hit Mosley. As fast as I spun out of there, I spun back, and I said, take this with you, and I fired. Boom.
I was asking him for the third time to tell me about what happened that night, and he started going off and cussing me out and told me to get out of his house. So I left, and that was it.